Hey everyone, it's Christian here. Happy Saturday to you. This week's episode is a little different. So we're going to take a trip back in time, back to 2023. I had just been producing this particular show, Tell Us About Yourself, for a few months. Work had started on it in October, pitched it in September, started gathering guests in October, recorded all throughout November, and here we are, 100 whatever episodes later. This interview, is from a period in time where we were still sort of finding our feet when it came to how we wanted to go about recording guests over the phone. The podcast I had previously, Stranger Than Christian, everything was originally by phone back in the day when I first started a few years ago. But as I got a little more experience in this thing and started to desire better sound quality, and I was listening to other podcasts and I just wanted that richness of their voices. I don't even know if we're there, but as those things became more important to me, I upped it to Zoom, and there was a web-based thing called Squadcast, all these different platforms for recording. Never a phone again though. It was all online. It was all on my computer. So for this podcast, I'm speaking to people that have had experiences that were 40, 50, 60 years ago. Those people don't always have access to Zoom or an iPad or a laptop. And so we do make the accommodation of conducting interviews by phone when required. This is one of those situations. So I apologize in advance for the quality of the audio. I hope that you find value in the conversation itself. It's with a woman named Hunter Hampton, who was on a couple of the shows. She was on The Joker's Wild in the 80s, which is actually how I found her. She uploaded her video of her appearance on the show to YouTube. The video itself has a pretty interesting story that you'll hear about in the course of our chat as well. And she was on The Match Game in the 60s, back in the day when it was filmed at Rockefeller Center in New York, and the format was a little different. It wasn't incredibly dirty yet. It was still Gene Rayburn as the host. And, another reason why I thought this audio was still worth sharing is the story about her interactions with her guest celebrity on Match Game. I hope we went about talking about it the right way. I've been interviewing people for years and years, and there are always situations in which I hope I come across as my best, not only my best, but also letting the guest be their best. And so I hope that story, you agree that it's worth sharing and it's worth putting out there. I will not be one to silence anyone's voice, especially a female when it comes to talking about their personal experiences and speaking their truth in that way. So that's all I got. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a lot of fun to record. It was a lot of fun to talk to Hunter. I hope she's well. This was, again, a couple years ago. But we're going to play it for you now for the first time since it was recorded way back in 2023. Enjoy.
Tell us about yourself, would you?
Tell us something about you.
For any new viewers, why don't you tell us again about yourself?
We've met before, but let's meet again. Tell us about
What
yourself.
else can you tell us about yourself?
Perhaps you'd fill us in again and tell us about yourself.
My name is Hunter Hampton. I was originally born and raised in New York City, Manhattan, and I am now retired living in Florida. My first ever game show was The Match Game, and that was in 1960. What was that? 60, my kid was 68. 1968. I was on, Gene Rayburn was the host, and the format back then was 2 players and 2 stars. The stars in my episode were Jane Powell, the movie star, and Mitch Miller, the band guy. And Mitch Miller was my star. You didn't change like shows nowadays sometimes change after, each game. We didn't. We stayed with our stars. I can tell you a little about the experience. Gene Rayburn was very nice. I think he got smarmy later on, but he was like just a really nice guy at the time. I kind of screwed up at one point. The format was they would say a sentence and then you would fill in the blank at the end. And at one point, something was about blue. And I was supposed to come up with a word that goes with blue. And I don't remember what I said, but when I said it, the audience went, ugh. And so I knew I had screwed up. So I said to Gene Rayburn, "Can I change my answer?" And he looked at me stunned. He said, "No one's ever done that before." But he said, "I guess it's okay." So I changed it to blue. I know, isn't that funny? I changed it to Blue Moon, and it was right. Blue Moon was the right answer. So I won. And, the audience was all happy for me and stuff. The audience was lovely. I can tell you about Jane Powell. She was, I don't know how old she was, maybe in her 50s, and she looked really good. And she was very pretty, and she had the most striking blue eyes I've probably ever seen. And I've stood next to Paul Newman many times, and his eyes are nothing compared to how blue hers are. And at some point, maybe I don't know, did they make those blue things back then? I don't know. Maybe they were fake.
Oh,
blue.
contact lenses. Right.
Yeah,
I don't know if they make.
I mean, they were just
You know what?
blue.
Hunter, let me pause you for a second because I want to get into the whole match game experience in detail. I want to provide a little bit of background first before we get into that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So I have had the pleasure of talking to a lot of contestants who grew up in New York City in the 50s, 60s, early 70s, and I'm led to believe that New York was a great place to be if you wanted to see a television show live. Is that true?
Sure. I saw Ed Sullivan. I've seen a lot. I went to a lot of shows. Not to mention theater and museums and ballets and, everything. I mean, I feel sorry for everybody who didn't grow up in the 50s. When I tell people I grew up in New York City, they look at me like, that's so sad. And I'm like, no, it was wonderful. I mean, I wouldn't change my childhood in New York City for anything in the world. First of all, horses are my passion. And I rode horses twice a week growing up from the age of 4 on. They're still my passion, actually. But New York City has everything anybody could ever want in life.
It's true. My parents are from New York, and I have heard so many stories, and I've been there so many times, and it's my favorite city in the whole world.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know that I'd want to live there now, unless I had a chauffeur.
But, right. It is tough to get around. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I loved it as a child. I didn't ever have to ask my parents to bring me places. And I have a funny story about all of this that goes with Joker later.
Sure. Oh, I can't wait to hear it. How important were game shows to you back then? I mean, there were tons of shows on the air in the 50s and 60s. Match Game was just one of them. I think NBC had maybe 6 or 7 different shows on in the course of a typical day at one point during the 60s. Were you a lover of that type of entertainment?
Yeah, I've always watched game shows. I still do. I tape Jeopardy every night so I don't miss it because I'm usually outside when it's on, but I always come in and watch it. And I watch the $1 million. It's not $1 million. I used to love that $1 million show. They took that off the air. I like, this sounds terrible, but I like the smarter game shows, where you have to know things. Like, I don't like the one where they spin the wheel. Is that okay to say?
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. Right, something like Wheel of Fortune. It sounds like you like a quiz show rather than a game show.
Yes.
And was that a type of television that always appealed to you? I mean, I think of the 50s, and I think of all the big money shows that were on at that time, like the $64,000 Question and 21, and until until it was found out that all those shows were rigged. I mean, those were the most popular shows on TV. I wonder if your interest in that type of game show stems from that particular era.
Probably. I used to like Password. Sometimes I only watch a show because I sort of like the host. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely does. Well,
not-
back then, I mean, the host of the show, well, that was a huge element of a game show. It was, if you didn't have a good host, you didn't have much.
Yeah. There was a host, the one where they asked families questions. There was
Right, Family Feud, Richard Dawson.
Yeah, but before him, there was a host from Cincinnati, I think, who committed suicide.
Oh,
Of a
Ray
fresh
Combs
show.
was after Richard Dawson, right? Yes.
I loved Ray Combs. I thought he was the best of all those hosts on that show. And I was really sad when I heard about that.
Yeah, I was too. I actually just a couple of weeks ago had a conversation with a man whose family was on his version of Family Feud, and he was similarly heartbroken when he found out about Ray. I thought he was the best Family Feud host there's ever been. I don't think anyone has done it better than he did.
I do too. He was such a nice guy.
Yeah.
He didn't make fun
He
of
was nice,
people.
very accessible sense of humor. Yeah.
I don't like it when any of them make fun of people, and they do. Of course, maybe my favorite of all time, now that I'm thinking about it, was what's his name, who played Templeton the Rat. He was on Hollywood Squares. What was not a host, one of the stars. His name is on the tip of my tongue. Templeton the Rat. He was probably the funniest person that's ever lived. Real quick on the funny answers. I'm actually Googling.
Yeah, actually, I'm right here too. Let me see if I can.
I'm looking up Templeton.
Yeah.
Wait. Templeton. Oh God.
Oh, Paul Lynde.
Paul Lynde. He's the funniest person that ever lived. So I always watched Hollywood Squares. I didn't care what the questions were. I just wanted to hear the answers from he and Jonathan Winters. I was obsessed with that show. Absolutely obsessed.
That was a classic, and it was on for so long. Absolutely. Well, that's one of those shows where, it really should be. But I think at the same time, I'm a fan of the older game shows, and I don't know how many personalities are out there right now that are magnetic and witty enough that they could carry a show the way they used to do back then. That's just my personal
opinion. That would be a good point. Yeah. I mean, somebody like The Rock. He would be great on a game show, but he's making $1 bazillion a minute to make movies. Why would he do that?
That's true. It's unfortunate. Yeah, it's unfortunate that so many celebrities see game shows as a step below or something, sort of beneath them or lowbrow. I mean, they're so worthy of respect, and they're so worthy of celebration.
Well, they have a huge audience. Look at Jeopardy and Wheel. I mean, everyone I know watches Jeopardy.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and those will never, they'll never not be popular. They will always enjoy some degree of popularity. Who were some of the hosts that you liked back then? You mentioned Password. I think Alan London was one of the classiest hosts there ever was. But who were some of the other ones that you really liked?
God, tell me their names and I'll tell you if I like them. I can't remember.
All right, here, I'll rattle some off. Let's see. The one that comes to my mind, my favorite, I think, of the old school hosts was Bill Cullen.
Yeah, actually, he was on what? To Tell the Truth?
He was a panelist. He hosted the original Price is Right. He hosted, oh my God, dozens of shows. But yeah, he was a panelist on To Tell the Truth for a while.
All right, my mother was once on To Tell the Truth. So I'm associating him with my mother. Possibly he was a panelist when she was up there lying about who she was.
Oh, that's entirely possible. Do you remember what she had to lie about?
I do not. It's a long time ago.
Sure,
I was a kid.
Okay. Yeah, that's entirely possible. He was a panelist, I think, throughout that version started in 69 and went through until 77. I think he was on there just about the entire run.
Yeah, I mean, I'm associating him with her on that show.
Sure. Well, there are
what
hosts,
other?
right, like Bill Cullen. There's Bob Eubanks from the Newlywed Game, who I thought was pretty good.
Oh my God, he was so racy.
He was. Yes, he was. And the show, there was nothing else like it. Yeah.
Yeah, you waited for, I mean, I love the show. And I remember waiting for people to say something absolutely horrifying. I mean, that was the fun of the show. That some marital thing that nobody should know. And they would blurt it out thinking they were going to win money saying it. So that was fun.
Yeah, that's true. That's the beginning of that type of show, I think. You talk about the shows where the host would make fun of the contestants. I mean, I think that was the genesis of that type of game show.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I always thought
Sure.
God.
Tell me what you remember about going to see the Match Game in 1968.
When I was on it?
Yeah, tell me about how you came
to become a contestant on it. I was on it. I don't remember how I got on it or who suggested I get on it or anything else. I just know that I was there. I was really young. I was like 21 or something. And what I remember is Jane Powell with those blue eyes. And when we had finished, and I won both games, so I beat her and her contestant, my opponents. And I said to her something about how beautiful her eyes were. And she looked at me like a turd in a swimming pool. Like, how dare I speak to her? If looks could kill, I would have turned to stone right there. And I was a kid. I mean, I thought I was being nice to her, But she was she mad. She never said a word to me. She never said thank you or anything. She was just furious. I could tell. I mean, when somebody's angry. And then I'll tell you about Mitch Miller. He was all over me. To the point where I was physically pushing him away. He asked me to go out to dinner afterwards. He was older than my father. I mean, he wasn't really that old now in retrospect. But when you're 21, when someone's 35 years older than you, they're sort of ancient, And here he was coming on to me through the whole show. He had his hand on my thigh. I had a skirt on. And behind the desk, and he's like, got his hand there, and I'm on camera shoving his hand off me. But trying not to make it so you could see it. It was really bizarre. And then afterwards, he's asking me to come to dinner and this and that and come away for the weekend. I'm like, leave me alone. So that was my Match Game experience. Oh, and one more thing. I won both games. And I got a check in the mail from Goodson Todman Productions for $252. That's how long ago it was.
Wow.
And
That's for the late 60s, that's a big win.
Well, it was the late 60s. But I guess it was a big win. And there was no coming back the next day if you won, sadly, like there was on Joker.
I think that when I had asked about going to see the match game, I was under the impression that the contestants for that show were chosen from the audience, but I guess that wasn't the case.
No. If it was, I don't remember ever being a guest there, but if it was, it wasn't that day, certainly.
Right.
You know what? I don't know. I don't remember how I got on the show. You know, it was a long time ago. I'm old now.
I am very disheartened to hear about your experience with Mitch Miller. I can't imagine
it was so
the
good.
feeling. Yeah, I
so
can't imagine. I can't imagine the feeling of having to defend yourself in that way on TV and to feel like you need to do so in such a way that doesn't embarrass yourself. Right, on camera, to do so in a way that doesn't embarrass yourself, that doesn't embarrass him, that doesn't embarrass the show. I mean, that's,
Exactly. I was literally sending him off on air.
And had anyone noticed? Did you tell anyone after the
show? Sitting behind the desk. There's a desk in front of you. And I don't know that anyone, back then, that was a lot more accepted than it is now, sadly. I don't know if anyone would have dared say something to one of the stars anyway.
One of the aspects of game shows that I have, for better or worse, gotten in touch with over the past few years as I sort of intensified my studying of this type of TV is that dynamic that was, like you said, very sadly in place for a very long time. That women were very much disrespected, were very much sort of window dressing for a lot of these shows. Were not in a position where they were able to speak or they were sort of relegated to positions where they're modeling the prizes and not saying anything, or they're sort of objectified. I guess would be the word for it. And it's a part of game show history that I've grown very uncomfortable with. And looking at TV these days, I think that we've come a long way in some ways. In some ways we haven't. But to hear stories like what you're describing just highlights that for me. What an unfortunate dynamic that was to have in place at that time.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. And I tell all my friends.
Good, as you should.
I hope they never hear this. He was a bad boy.
Yeah, as you should. Yeah, you had asked me in the setup or in the conversation leading up to our chat here if it was okay to talk about the the celebrities in a way that might be less than flattering, and I'm all for it. I'm all for honest depictions of these experiences. And I'm sorry that was a negative aspect of this for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't dwell on things like that. It was still fun to be on it. And back then, $252 was a fortune to me. I mean, I was divorced and had no money and was raising a kid. So $250 windfall. Oh, my God. That's like a month's rent. That was rent and food back then.
Now this version of the match game was considerably different than what is still on in reruns today. I would say the more famous version of the show. This show, first of all, was on for 7 years, and it was a lot more, I would say, a lot more cerebral, a little more sedate than the more famous version of the show that would come about in the 70s. It was all about matching the answers of your fellow panelists. So they give a rather innocuous question. They say, name a kind of bread, or name an instrument in an orchestra, and you'd have to write down what you think your partners would say.
No, it wasn't that at all.
Was it not?
No, I believe, from what I remember, is they would either ask the audience or ask random people to finish a sentence. And then we would get on there and try to finish the sentence. Unless I'm totally...
Okay.
I mean, I could be totally wrong, but like the Blue Moon thing that I gave you.
Right. Yeah, I think
I
that
feel like they would ask 100 people how they would end that sentence, and then I would write my answer, and the other person would write their answer, and then whoever got it right won that round, or something like
so
that.
I think that was the sort of bonus round. Once you win the game, you get to play that the audience match, what they used to call it. Right, they'd ask 100 people to answer a question, and you have to guess what they said.
Oh, well, then I remember it was like 60 years ago or something.
Oh no, that's okay. But either way, you're matching answers, and it's nowhere near the sort of parade of sexual innuendo that the newer version of Match Game was. It was very far removed from that. Right. And so it was a little more of a cerebral game. Yeah.
The only thing sexual about it was my partner. Nothing else. Nothing else was going on, and Gene Rayburn wasn't as smarmy like he got later. He was just nice, and he was really nice when he let me change my answer, which no one had ever done before, apparently in the history of the show. So that was quite the coup for me.
Well, it's very accommodating of him, and it's very welcoming of him to know that you might have slipped up and said something you didn't mean to say, and for him to let you change your answer, yes, it's very hospitable of him, and I think that's what you need.
Yeah, I loved it.
Someone who can make the contestants feel welcome. Did you get?
Yeah, I liked it because I got the right answer on the second guess.
Right, that's all the more reason to like it. Absolutely. So, did you get a chance to see yourself on TV when you were on the Match Game?
Do you know, I did. I can remember watching it, but I'm not sure why I got off work unless I asked work or they had a TV at work, maybe. I don't remember the act of sitting there watching it. But okay. I do know that I saw it.
Sure. I'm always curious about the reactions of people who've never seen themselves on TV before, doing so for the first time. I know that when I was on TV, I've been on a few game shows, and when I was on my very first one, I walked it, and it was very surreal to see myself in that setting and to see myself, in the third person.
How did you do on the shows? What were you on?
I've been on 6 shows. My 18th birthday, I was on The Price is Right with Bob Barker, and I won a sofa. It was great. my freshman year of my freshman year of college, I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I won $15,000.
I love the woman who was the host. Remember the woman who hosted it?
Meredith Vieira. She was my host. She was a class act, and that was the only host. So the only host I ever worked with, where after the show, I got a card from her in the mail thanking me for being on the show. She was so classy.
I knew she was a class act. I absolutely knew it because I just thought she was probably one of the best game show hosts ever in history.
Yeah, I think so as well. She made me feel so at home and so welcome, and that was such an intimidating experience. And I really credit her with a lot of my success on that show. I'm very grateful that it was her.
Good for you.
Yeah, and then it was great. It was great, and it helped my first year of college. It helped a lot. A couple years later, I was on Hollywood Squares. I won $1,000, and that paid for the first date with the woman that I've now been married to for 6 years.
Oh, I love it. That was quite a date for $1,000. Where'd you take
Well,
off?
you know what? Our first date was in New York City. Actually, we met in Grand Central Station, and we spent the day in the city.
Well, that could cost $1,000.
Yeah, just about. I had a little bit of change left over.
I hope you ate at Le Cirque or something.
Where did we go? No, you know where we went? We went to Junior's for cheesecake and salad.
Oh, what fun!
We had great fun. It was
That
wonderful.
sounds like I go to Lindy's for cheesecake.
Oh, yeah, Lindy's used to be in Well, actually, I think this Junior's was in Times Square as well. I don't know that it's there anymore. The main one is, I forget where in the city it is. I've been there exactly once with my family, but this one was in Times Square. And, yeah, wonderful time. Wonderful time. Anyway, let's talk about the Joker's Wild. Now, have recently had the experience of seeing yourself again on the tape after so long. How did you come to own a copy of your episodes of the Joker's Wild?
I owned it because back in the day, I bought the world's biggest VCR. It cost me $1,500 in RCA, and I taped every episode when I was on it because I was at work when it was showing. But when I taped it, all these years later, and since then, I was living in Connecticut then. And after that, I moved to Cincinnati and then to South Carolina. I had horse farms. And then I moved into an Airstream trailer for 15 years and just traveled around the United States. And my little VHS tapes have been to 48 states with me. I just dragged them around. Isn't that funny? I just couldn't part with them. I moved out of a 4,000 square foot house into a 170 square foot Airstream and dragged those VHS tapes with me. And then last week or a couple weeks ago, there was a guy here in Florida who advertised that he would take VHS tapes and make them digital. So I had him put them on thumb drives. And then I posted them up on YouTube for my friends who for years have heard that I was on Joker, and always wanted to see it, but no one has a VCR anymore. So,
right. And now they're they're thankfully in a format that doesn't deteriorate the way that tape does. Now that they're digital, you could own those forever.
Exactly. I have them on a not on a hard drive as well as on thumb drives. He also made DVDs for me, which
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it was fun reliving that whole thing and telling my friends the whole experience was so crazy wild.
So what year were you on the Joker's Wild, and what were the circumstances of your appearance? Because this show taped in Hollywood, and that's pretty far from Connecticut or Ohio.
I believe 84, and I was in Connecticut at the time, and I worked for a travel tour company called Tauk Tours. They do motor coach tours around the world. That just then they were just the U.S. and Canada, but now they're worldwide. Very deluxe tours. And my daughter and I were watching Tic-Tac-Toe one day, and I was just rattling off every answer they asked. And she said to me, "Why don't you go on that show?" And I thought, what a good idea. My then boyfriend was flying out to California on business, and I was going to go with him. So I wrote them and said, I want to come on. And they said, come ahead, and gave me an appointment date. And we flew out there, and then he drove me and dropped me off while he went on to do business. And I went in and I said, I'm here to be on Tic-Tac-Toe. And they said, we're not doing that today. We're doing Joker's Wild. And I said, well, I'm here for Tic-Tac-Toe. And they're like, no, you're not. You're here for Joker or go home. So I said, all right. I'd never watched Joker. I had no idea what the format was or anything else. And so I went into a room with maybe, I'm going to say 30 to 40 people. And we sat down and we took a written test. It was 100 questions, multiple choice, 3 choices for each, each question. The hardest test I've ever taken in my life because every answer was reasonable and could be right. So I took the test and then they let us out for lunch. And then I got a call back. Now I had to call them back. I guess we didn't have cell phones then. So I had to call them back and they said, you passed the test. Come in this afternoon at 2 or something. So I went in and there were only out of, say, the 30 or 40, there were about 5 of us who had passed. I'm telling you, the test was the hardest thing ever. I have such respect for everybody who got on that show because it's not easy. So then at the 2:00 meeting, we had to stand up and just talk about ourselves in front of the other contestants and the people who work for the show. Well, I'm a ham, so I just got up there and rattled away. And then it was over and we went home. I flew back to Connecticut. And then they called and said they would like me to come in again and interview and play the game. So I flew back to California and my interview was with Jack's son, who was a producer on the show. I can't remember his name. It might be
John, I think is his name.
He was very, very attractive, about my age. So we sat down at a table, and he said to me, his first question out of his mouth was, so where did you grow up? And I said, New York City. And he said, oh, I did too. Where? And I said, Manhattan. He said, me too. Where in Manhattan? I said, 84th and East End, Gracie Square. And he looked at me like I was insane. He said, I grew up at 83rd and East End. We grew up a block apart in the city, that whole big city.
Wow.
So he said to me, now we're like totally zoned in on each other. He said, where'd you go to school? And I said, Chapin. And he said, Chapin? I used to hang over the wall and watch the girls in gym. And I said, that was you? At that point, exactly. At that point, we burst out laughing. And from then on, we were just like old friends talking. You know what I mean? We had just totally bonded. Yeah. Sure. So I thought, well, that went well. And then it was a lunch break or something. And then I went back again after lunch because I had passed that, which I knew I had at that point because he was my new best friend. And we had to actually play the game against all the other people all week who had, or since I had been there, they said a couple hundred people a week take that test and like 40 pass it out of a couple hundred. It's really hard. So respect.
Yeah, they do make those tests very difficult. I've heard it. I've taken the Jeopardy test. I've taken the Jeopardy test about 6 times. I don't think I've ever passed it. The test that I took, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, was difficult. By the grace of God, I passed that after I think my 7th or 8th attempt. They make the test very difficult. I think that ensures that the people who get on the show know what they're doing.
Oh, I do too. I mean, they don't want idiots up there just staring every time they ask a question.
Sure.
Not doing anything. When I was waiting to go on, there was, 2 people playing, and the question was, what is the 50th state? Well, I mean, I knew what it was, but there's 2 possible choices. So
Sure.
One contestant said Alaska. So I thought, oh, okay, now the other one's going to get it. And the other one said Puerto Rico.
Oh, cool.
And I thought, that's just nerves, because I mean, first of all, it's not at stake. And second, they were able to pass that test. So how could they get that wrong? That had to be nerves. I mean, you know, you've done it. The lights, the camera, the audience. It's like I understood when it was all over. You know, you know how you shoot 5 days in a day?
Right.
You have people like firing questions. I thought to myself, I understand why people admit to crimes they didn't do. You know?
Right. It is massive pressure. It's immense pressure. And I think in particular about Wheel of Fortune, and I think about how you'll see a puzzle that's partially revealed and it will say, so it'll be the Lion King, and the K will be the only letter that's covered up.
Yeah.
Spin the wheel, and they'll say R, and people at home go, "Why did they say that?" But people
in the audience
put anyone in that situation. It is nerves. Put any regular person in that situation, and see how well they can keep their mind straight in the presence of the money and the lights and the audience and it's a lot. It's a lot. And I agree with you. A lot of respect to the people who can pass a test for a show like that.
Yeah, it's really hard. So then I passed playing the game. I did well. So then I went home. Now it was summer break. And I sort of forgot about it, but I had told some friends that I had applied, the 2 times I flew out. And then I got a phone call saying that I had made it onto the show. And I'm like, who is this? I almost hung up on him because I thought it was one of my friends just screwing around with me. And then I went, oh, maybe it's not a friend. Maybe I did get on. So then I flew out. It was in the fall. So they had just come back from summer, and I flew out in the fall and did it. And I think it showed around Christmas. I was there maybe late September or early October.
Right. Now, I want to pause you for just a second because I have very fond memories of the Joker's Wild, but I don't know that a lot of other people that may be listening to this are immediately familiar with the game. So the Joker's Wild was the show with the giant slot machine, and it displayed categories, and you pull your handle, the wheels spin, and you pick your question based on the categories that appear. The Joker you could use for any category, and it's a pretty hard game of trivia. It's a question and answer thing, and it's a lot of luck and it's a lot of knowledge, and it's a challenging game.
And there's some math involved, because if your contestant has 400 and you come up with a question that's 100, if you miss it, then they get a shot at it. So at one point, I could have been 100. I did 50 because if I missed it, I didn't want my opponent to. You see what I mean? So there is
because $500 wins the game, so you don't want to give it to them.
That's right. I don't know if you noticed, but I did that on one of my questions on the show. I strategized and decided not to bet the full 100 in case I lost.
Yeah, I did notice it, and I think it's good strategy because, again, it guarantees that if you get it wrong, the other contestant won't
get it right and still not win.
Sure, right, yeah, exactly, right. It won't put them at 500. So I would love to know how you felt going into that first game. I imagine that on such a large set and in front of such a large audience, it can be a little nerve-wracking to settle into that environment. How did you handle appearing on that show for the first time?
Actually, very well. I had been an extra in movies, so I had some experience with lights, camera, action kind of thing. And as I said, I'm a ham. So to me, it was fun to walk out there. They asked me one question in my mind. It's one of the first questions, and I froze. My head froze. And then I blurted out the right answer. And the minute that happened, it was smooth sailing ever after that. So I really at no point was a bundle of nerves. I mean, I was fortunate, I think. A couple things upset me. There was you know how they have a question where everybody's missed it so far? So,
Right, the Stumpers category was all questions that were missed on previous episodes.
yes, yeah, they asked it to me, and the buzzer went. And the minute the buzzer went, if you look really closely, you can see where I get it. I knew it. It was Henry Miller. I'll never forget it. And they were asking who wrote, I don't know, Tropic of Cancer or something, and it was Henry, and I was blank. And the minute the buzzer rang, Miller, and I could see myself get it. And I wanted to impress Jack by getting it because other people hadn't. And then I didn't get it. So I was really upset about that. It's funny how you remember things like that. And if you caught me side-eyeing, I also side-eyed this woman. She came on and she was like real slim and cute. And she said she was I don't know, a vegetarian and this and that. And my best friend caught the side eye when I was staring straight ahead but trying to check her out. It was sort of funny.
Sure. You mentioned Jack Barry, the host of the show, also the producer, co-creator. What was it like interacting with Jack in person?
I didn't interact with him that much. He gave me little things when he was going to introduce me to say, like that I was a go-go dancer, and then he made a little joke. You know, I said, "Did your wife let you go?" And he said, "No, I couldn't go." You know, something like that. That was all pre-planned. So that's really the only time that I talked to him. You know, every time after a show, I'd have to run back and change and look like it's the next day.
How many of those episodes did you do in a day?
5.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
And
That's a long day.
That's how I ended up losing on that last day. Although I would have lost anyway when I did the math on the spins. But they asked me a question that I knew the last day. They could have asked me my last name, and I would have just stared at them just as blankly as I did. I started around 8 a.m. We had some food, they had like a little craft service kind of thing. And
Sure.
then until 7 p.m, I had no food, no water. I just ran back, changed my hair, ran back in. And at no point from 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. did any food or water hit me. And I think between the lights, the heat, all the pressure, no food, my mind shut down.
Sure. Well,
Because
that's
I
a
asked
far
you a
cry
question. The
from
question.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
Well, it's a far cry from the way these shows are done today. I was on the newer Match Game in 2019, and I remember them force feeding us candy and soda and snacks just to keep our energy up, just to keep everybody's bodies going. Everybody, I remember them just force feeding everyone sugar. Same thing on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. The back room, where all the contestants waited, was nothing but granola bars and Coca-Cola and candy, and they just wanted everyone to be as energetic as they possibly could.
And there may have been food there, but I was I was going into the bathroom, and I had to have someone come with me to the bathroom. You weren't allowed to roam the halls or anything like that. You had a guard on you at all times. I think because of that scandal, they wanted to make sure I didn't have hidden answers somewhere or somebody telling me anything, like giving me, So it was like lockdown. So there may have been food sitting there, and the ones waiting to go on may have been just dining all day. But I had nothing from 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. And that I know that. I mean, I was bonkers by then.
Talking about the security involved in ushering the contestants around and having them follow you to the bathroom and this and that, a lot of that is attributed to standards and practices in the wake of the game show scandals. And I talked to another person who was on the Joker's Wild in 1973 or 74, and she had mentioned the same thing. I always wondered how much of that effort was on the part of the network and how much of it was on the part of Jack Barry himself, who was implicated in those scandals in the 50s. I always wonder if it was something that they sort of did proactively in the wake of all those things.
I don't know. Maybe here's a guess. Maybe they told him, we'll give you another show, but we're going to have people double checking everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're right. If you're going to do a show, we're gonna watch you. That could absolutely be it.
Yeah, that would be my guess as to why it was so locked down. I mean, they let me go in the bathroom, but they checked the bathroom before I went in, and then they stood outside.
Anything to keep the show safe, I guess, right?
Yeah. To make sure no one fed me questions, I assume.
Right. All told, at the end of your experience on the Joker's Wild, what did you walk away with in terms of cash, in terms of prizes? What did you win?
I won 2 trips. I won a trip to Mazatlan, Mexico. No, I won 3 trips. I won a trip to Mazatlan. I won a trip to California. Actually, because it's in California, I won a trip to New York, but I reversed it. And then I won a trip to Hawaii. I won a car, a Chevy Chevette, which I never even drove. They delivered it to my house. I put a classified ad in the Norwalk Hour, and sold it the day it got there to my house. I was driving a much nicer car, so I didn't want a Chevy Chevette. And then in cash, 20-something thousand. A lot of times I stopped because they were giving me like Broyhill furniture and all this stuff I didn't want. You know, if I beat the Joker at that, after you win a game, you play the Joker.
Oh, when you beat the devil, right? The end game.
Yeah,
right.
Before the devil comes up. And a lot of the presents I didn't want. So I thought, I'm risking $900 in cash for something I don't want. So I stopped a few times. If it was something I wanted, I went on. I don't think I ever hit the devil, but maybe once.
That's also a great strategy. I've always wondered, because the prizes for the bonus round on the Joker's Wild, I always thought were there were things that I wouldn't necessarily want. There'd be a metal detector and a dinette set, and those might be good for some people, but I don't. Right, and things that I wouldn't necessarily want. So I always wonder why more people didn't try to get to as close to that $1,000 winning score as possible, and then just walk away with that. I'd rather have $950 than an extra $50 and a bunch of stuff I now have to worry about, where to put.
Yeah, exactly. Because I didn't want it. The only other big thing I won besides I won some jewelry, I think, which I gave away. Fake jewelry, not real costume jewelry.
Sure, like Sarah Coventry kind of, yeah.
I won this giant trampoline, and I didn't want the thing. So I donated it to like the police association or Boys Town, some kid place. I donated it to.
I always wonder what people do with the prizes that they don't want. I remember when I left The Price is Right, outside the studio, there were a bunch of furniture dealers that would offer you cash to sign over any furniture that you won and you didn't want. They would just hang out at the exits of the studio and catch all the contestants on the way out. Yeah, I would have too. I won a sofa, and I honestly, I wanted to keep the sofa, and I did. I got it about 3 months later, and it was very comfortable for a very long time.
Well, yeah. I mean, you were a college kid, so who doesn't want a sofa?
Oh yeah. Oh, it was fantastic. It got delivered one day in the middle of the summer, about 3 months after the show, and I was very, very grateful.
Yeah, I would be too. But, those Broyhill dinette sets just didn't do it for me. Plus, you
Sure.
already
Oh
have
yeah, take
furniture.
the cash.
If you're a grown up and you live in a house, you have furniture.
Well, not to mention the fact that you would take a 15-year trip in a trailer, you wouldn't have any room for half of that stuff anyway.
I know. When I bought the house I'm in now, I didn't have it's not like I moved from a house to a house. I had to completely furnish a house like a newlywed. Except that I'm happily single. I did marry that
What?
guy who was in the audience. You know what I did? I married him on December 28th so I could absorb taxes on my winnings.
So much strategy. I love it.
I know.
It's almost the same thing as not going for the $100 to make sure the other person doesn't get the win. It's the marital equivalent of the Joker's Wild. I love it.
Yeah, when we got
That's
divorced,
excellent.
when I bought the Airstream and my F-350 crew cab 4x4 diesel, and off I went.
Oh, God bless you. What an adventure that must have been.
It was the most fun thing anyone has ever done in the history of fun things.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm sure we could talk for days about that trip alone.
Oh, yeah, I could. I could tell you everything for hours. It was so cool. But it has nothing to do with the game show.
Oh no, that's all right. Well, I would love to know in closing here how you feel about having had these incredibly unique experiences. I've talked about this more and more frequently with the guests that I've had on the show. The idea that so many thousands of people try out for game shows every year, and the fact that that number gets whittled down and whittled down and whittled down to the very precious few that you see on a game show day to day. I would love to know how you feel about having made it through that process, about having these experiences, and having the footage that you can look back on so fondly. How do you feel about all of that?
I love it. I love it. First of all, I was proud that I answered all those questions. I mean, I know I'm smart, but still they were hard. I mean, those questions were hard. I don't know what my score. They didn't tell us our score, I will add. But anyway, I still to this day will drop in conversation. They'll say, have you ever been to Mexico? And I'll say, yeah, I won a trip to Mazatlan on a game show. And then they immediately ask me a million questions, and I'm so happy to tell them all about it, like I just did you. I love that I was on, especially, the match game was just one time, so I don't really didn't bond with it like I did with Joker. And remember, there was one point where I lost, but the guy had given a funny answer, so they brought me back. Although, because I lived in New York, they never sent me away. They just came back and said, even though you lost, we're going to bring you back on, because he pronounced Ganges, the river, Ganja.
Right. Right.
And I remember my eyes lit up a little when he said it, but it's their show. But I was sad that I had lost the second person I had lost, and then they brought me back on, and that's when I started cruising. But I loved it. I'm going to tell you, I don't know how you felt when you lost, but I was absolutely crushed. It seemed like I was going to win forever. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I don't know, in my experience, if I was on a show long enough to feel that. I was never I was never a returning champion on any of my shows. They were all sort of one and done. And I remember being disappointed that I didn't win the car on The Price is Right. I played for a car and I lost. And I remember being very temporarily disappointed. I remember being disappointed that I didn't win $1 million on Millionaire, and I thought I should have done better, should have studied more. Little regrets here and there, but altogether, I love game shows and I love being in front of the camera, and that's what I've wanted to do my entire life, is be on television. And so just having those experiences, I walk away considering those to be the prize. Anything else I win is great, but just having those experiences, at least in my mind, like I would trade anything for that.
Yeah, but I was still, I was on for 3 weeks because I was on the middle of a week, then all the next week, then till the middle of the next week. So it was, 3 weeks in California, which I love too.
Anyone would have been crushed to leave California for that long. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had 6 days to play and then 1 day of actual filming. But it seemed like I was on such a roll that I just felt like I was never going to lose. It was such a high winning. And then I lost. And I was really kind of crushed, I will say. And oddly, what a coincidence. Some people that knew me from Connecticut happened to be in California on vacation and got tickets to the show and were in the audience on my last show. I mean, the odds of that are zero.
Wow.
But it happened.
Absolutely. That's incredible.
So they took me out to dinner, and I was kind of in a fog during dinner. I was just in a fog. But remember, I hadn't eaten since 8 o'clock that morning or had anything to drink. So that could have been why I was in kind of a fog. But I loved the experience. I was devastated that they didn't have a tournament of champions, because if they did, I would have gotten on. Somebody told me I was
probably would have cleaned up.
winner.
Yeah.
Someone told me I was the top woman winner, but then somebody on YouTube said that some woman ahead of me had won way more than I did. So I guess I wasn't.
Oh, you're up there, though. I think you're definitely up there.
And, I got fan mail, which was interesting. When you're on a game show and you roll over, you get fans. Like when there's somebody on Jeopardy that's amazing, then people tune in who didn't usually, but they're hearing about this guy. So I got fan mail. And at one point in my life, I was a private investigator for a very short time. And I had some guy write me and he wanted me to find somebody for him. People, I don't even know how they got I guess they wrote the show and they forwarded fan mail to me at home. That must be how it was.
Oh, okay.
But I got fan mail. I mean, I had a little following on the show, which was kind of nice. I thought that was sweet.
Yeah, that is an incredible experience. Did you keep anything from the show? I'm doing this podcast for the National Archives of Game Show History. I had the pleasure of looking through their archives and seeing just the sheer volume of physical props and cards and set pieces from these shows. And I always wonder if the contestants keep anything that reminds them of their experience. Like I have a couple of name tags that I've had and tickets and things like that. What about you?
No, I wish I had. Name tags would be fun. I kind of got rid of everything I owned when I moved into the Airstream, except clothes and a chair,
And your tapes.
And my tapes. I kept, it's so funny. I kept my tapes. I wish there was a tape of Match Game, but there's not. Somebody on YouTube told me that they only taped after I was on.
Yeah, I think the original version, it's actually sort of sad, but to save space, NBC destroyed a lot of their tapes from like pre-1971, 72. So a lot of that is just completely gone. It's very sad how much lost media there is from that era of television.
Yeah, because that'd be fun to have too. But all I can, I remember what I remember.
Tell us about yourself. Conversations with Game Show Contestants is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Christian Carrion, from my studio in beautiful downtown Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. Co-executive producer Cory Anotado. Researcher Chuck Donegan. This has been a production of BuzzerBlog, the most popular game show website in the world, in partnership with the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. For more information, visit museumofplay.org. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Christian Carrion. Good night. Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99, download the free Bonus Round app on iOS, Android, and Roku, and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. In a world where game show imperfections go unchecked, where judgment calls are questionable, and where clocks tick with unsynced inaccuracy, there is but one elite force to investigate it all. Armed with the latest in atomic electromagnetometer and gas chromatography mass spectrometry technology, Game Show Forensics is always on the case. Join Robert McKee and his elite squad of game show scientists as they dive headfirst into the most absurd depths possible at GameShowForensics.com. Adult discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury.